The Brazilian army resists classifying PCC and Comando Vermelho as terrorist organizations and exposes a conflict that Brasilia tried to hide. On one side, the Trump administration placed both factions in the field of US national security, labeling them as terrorists. On the other hand, military sectors in Brazil showed discomfort because this could draw the armed forces into a discussion that the leadership has avoided for years. This Saturday, May 30, 2026, the tension is not only in Lula's speech against Marco Rubio, nor just in Flavio Bolsonaro's gesture in Washington. The tension lies in the Brazilian state being paralyzed in the face of organizations that control territories, move money, and cross borders. What is so frightening? Why is there so much resistance from the army? How did Trump turn this debate against Brasilia? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward content with no beating around the bush, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. Information published by Editorial Central indicates that members of the armed forces have shown behind-the-scenes opposition to the legal classification of factions as terrorist organizations. The justification presented is that such a major change would open up debate about the constitutional role of the military in internal public security, something that the leadership has historically avoided. In simple terms, if Brazil calls these groups terrorists, there will be increased pressure for the state to use much harsher measures against them. This resistance arises right after Washington raised the importance of the issue and started treating the factions as a transnational threat. The Trump administration isn't just claiming there's crime in Brazil. It is saying that these networks reach the region, affect the United States, and need to be confronted using American legal tools. When the Brazilian army hesitates, the impression left is harsh. Abroad, Brazilian organized crime becomes a matter of national security. Here at home, part of the system still tries to keep the debate stuck in bureaucracy. The military's argument about the Constitution carries formal weight, but it doesn't address what's happening on the streets. If organized crime uses rifles, controls the area, moves international money, traffics drugs, corrupts agents, and imposes fear on ordinary citizens, how long will Brazil keep treating this as a regular police problem? The resistance from the military leadership avoids a direct response and pushes the political cost onto Brasilia. The Lula government now needs to explain why it rejects the American crackdown while promising to fight the same factions within the country. Lula reacted in an irritated tone on May 29th. He said he was saddened by the news involving Marco Rubio. He stated that Brazil does not accept being treated like a kid and criticized Flavio Bolsonaro for seeking support in Washington. He also said that PCC and Comando Vermelho are terrorists for Brazilian communities, but he rejected the way the United States framed the case. The contradiction was exposed. If these gangs are terrorists for the people who live under threat, why does the government get upset when Trump puts international pressure on these same organizations? The government tries to sell the idea that the American classification threatens sovereignty. But sovereignty without territorial control just becomes a fancy word in official speeches. A citizen living in an area controlled by a gang doesn't feel sovereignty when he has to obey a criminal's orders. The shopkeeper who pays an informal fee doesn't feel sovereignty. A family that cannot move freely does not experience sovereignty. And that's the point that Trump exploited. The debate left the office and went into real life. Prosecutor Lincoln Gaccia, a leading authority in the fight against the Primeiro Comando da Capital, brought another warning. According to him, the classification changes how the issue is handled within the United States, moving from a purely law enforcement approach to an area of defense and intelligence. He pointed out the concern that information may start to be classified as confidential or secret, and that this could affect the quick exchange of data between Brazilian and American authorities. He also raised the possibility of secret intelligence operations in Brazil, a scenario that put the CIA at the center of the debate. Previously, cooperation was handled as an exchange between police forces, with data about members, routes, arms trafficking, drug trafficking, and money laundering. With the new designation, Washington can increase secrecy, tighten tracking, and act with a different level of autonomy regarding networks it considers linked to terrorism. This scares Brasilia because it takes narrative control away from the Brazilian government. It's no longer just a local investigation, it's international pressure targeting money, contacts, companies, and intermediaries. The financial sector is highly sensitive. Analyses published in the press indicate that the classification could affect banks, insurance companies, funds, logistics companies, infrastructure, energy, mining, agribusiness, and export industries. If links with designated organizations are found, the risk does not lie with the ordinary worker or with a legitimate business. The risk arises for those who operate around dirty money, provide services to the wrong intermediary, turn a blind eye to money laundering, or benefit from a supply chain tainted by crime. Flavio Bolsonaro appears in this episode as the politician who brought the issue to Washington and turned the fight against the factions into an electoral weapon against Lula. The government was impacted because public security is a major weakness for the Workers' Party administration. Lula's response was not to embrace the pressure against PCC and Comando Vermelho and propose tough cooperation with clear rules. The response was to attack the US move, attack the Bolsonaros, and shift the debate to sovereignty. But the people want to know who will weaken the gangs, not who will win a political fight. The international reaction also gave some interesting signals. China defended the principle of non-interference and criticized external pressure on internal affairs. For Lula, this helps his diplomatic argument. For those looking at public security, the question remains unanswered. Who will face the real power of the gangs on the ground in Brazil? The next step begins on June 5th when the American designation takes effect. From then on, the Brazilian government will have to decide whether to cooperate with Washington on tough terms or insist on a political barrier that may seem like indirect protection for the systems surrounding the gangs. The army will have to explain whether its resistance is constitutional caution or fear of taking on a crisis that has already gone beyond routine police matters. The gangs will not be weakened by rhetoric. They will be pressured when money, logistics, political protection, and international connections are all hit at the same time. Trump's decision put this map on the table and forced Brasilia to take a stand. Now every retreat and every attempt to change the subject will be seen as fear of touching the most sensitive point. Brazil let crime grow too much and the world started to demand accountability. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.